Hello everybody, I hope you're all having a wonderful day or night, whatever time it happens to be, wherever you are in the world. My name is Jay, and welcome to episode 5 of History's Hangnails, the podcast where we deep dive on bizarre events and mysteries from our past. Before I begin, a brief disclaimer. The events explored here are of a graphic and violent nature, and the victims named were real people who were attacked and murdered by an incredibly unwell individual. If you are at all sensitive to these types of subjects, this is your fair warning. Today's episode takes us back to California, 1968. On December 20, just inside the city limits of Benicia, a waterside city in Solano County, David Arthur Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen were on their first date together, planning to later attend a Christmas concert at Hogan High School. They went to see a friend before stopping at a local restaurant and driving out onto Lake Herman Road, a popular overlook that young couples would frequent at the time. At around 10:15 p.m., Faraday parked his mother's Rambler in a gravel turnout, a well-known lover's lane. This would be the last time anyone saw them alive. Shortly after 11 p.m., their bodies were found by one Stella Borges, who lived nearby. The Solano County Sheriff's Department investigated the crime, but no leads were developed. It was speculated that another car had pulled into the turnout just prior to 11 p.m. and parked beside the couple. The killer may have exited the second car, walked towards the Rambler, possibly ordering the couple to get out of their vehicle. It appeared that Jensen exited first, but as Faraday got out, he was quickly shot in the head. Jensen's body was found 28 feet from the car, suggesting she had tried to run, but was shot 5 times in the back as she fled. In 1969, just before midnight, on July 4, another couple, Darlene Ferrin and Michael Majot, drove into the Blue Rock Springs Park in Vallejo, just 6.4 kilometers from where Faraday and Jensen were murdered several months prior. While they sat in the parked car, a second car drove into the lot and parked alongside them, almost immediately driving away again. Around 10 minutes later, the other car returned and parked behind them. The man exited his vehicle, approached the passenger side door of Ferrin's car, and directed a flashlight into the couple's eyes before firing 5 rounds at them with a 9mm Luger. Both victims were hit, and several bullets passed through Majot and into Ferrin. The killer walked away initially, then turned back, firing 2 more rounds into each victim, before eventually returning to his car and driving away. The next night, at 12:40 a.m., a man telephoned the Vallejo Police Department to report the killings and claim responsibility for the attack. The caller also took credit for the murders of Jensen and Faraday. Police traced the call back to a phone booth at a gas station at Springs Road and Tuolumne, located about 500 meters from Ferrin's home and only a few blocks from the police department. The transcript of the call reads, "I want to report a double murder. If you will go 1 mile east on Columbus Parkway to the public park, you will find the kids in a brown car. They were shot with a 9mm Luger. I also killed those kids last year. Goodbye." Darlene Ferrin was pronounced dead at the hospital, but Majot survived the attack, despite being shot in the face, neck, and chest. He also described the attacker as a white male with short, light brown curly hair, approximately 26 to 30 years old, weighing 88 to 91 kilograms, possibly more, and standing 1.73 meters or 5 foot 8 inches tall. Just 1 month later, on August 1, 1969, 3 letters were received by the Vallejo Times-Herald, the San Francisco Chronicle, and the San Francisco Examiner, respectively. These letters were nearly identical and took credit for the shootings at Lake Herman Road and Blue Rock Springs. Each letter also included 1/3 of a 408-symbol cryptogram, which the killer claimed would reveal his identity to whoever could solve it. He demanded it be printed on each paper's front page, or he would, quote, "cruise around all weekend, killing lone people in the night, then move on to kill again, until I end up with 12 people." The Chronicle published its third of the cryptogram on page 4 of the next day's edition, with an article printed alongside the code, quoting Vallejo Police Chief Jack E. Stilts as saying, "We are not satisfied that the letter was written by the murderer." He even requested the writer send a second letter containing more detailed facts to prove his claims. The murders threatened in the initial letter never occurred, and all 3 parts of the cryptogram were eventually published. On August 7, 1969, seemingly in response to Stilts' request for further proof, the San Francisco Examiner received a letter with the salutation, "Dear Editor, this is the Zodiac speaking." This marked the first time the name Zodiac would enter the public zeitgeist as a subject of fascination, frenzy, and mystery for years to come. In this second letter, the killer included details about the murders that had not yet been released to the public, also stating that when police cracked his code, quote, "they will have me." On August 8, Donald Harden, a history teacher, and his wife Betty of Salinas, California, cracked the 408-symbol cryptogram. It contained a misspelled message in which the killer seemed to reference The Most Dangerous Game, a short story by Richard Connell about a big game hunter from New York City who falls from a yacht and swims to what seems to be an abandoned island in the Caribbean, where he is captured and hunted by a Russian aristocrat. The letter, plagued by spelling mistakes and many grammatical errors, read as follows. "I like killing people because it is so much fun. It is more fun than killing wild game in the forest because man is the most dangerous animal of all. To kill something gives me the most thrilling experience. It is even better than getting your rocks off with a girl. The best part is that when I die, I will be reborn in paradise, and all that I have killed will become my slaves. I will not give you my name, because you will try to slow down or stop my collecting of slaves for my afterlife." The last line of the code turned out to be a series of leftover letters with no logical arrangement. The letters were E, B, E, O, R, I, E, T, E, M, E, T, H, H, P, I, T, I. There were attempts to rearrange or decode these final letters, though no sensible meaning has ever been derived. On September 27, 1969, 2 Pacific Union College students, Brian Hartnell and Cecilia Shepard, were picnicking at Lake Berryessa in Napa County, California, on a small island connected by a spit leading to Twin Oak Ridge. At some point, a man approached the young couple. He was reported to be about 5 feet 11 inches tall, weighing easily more than 77 kilograms, wearing a black executioner's hood with clip-on sunglasses covering the eye holes, and a bib-like device hanging from his chest, bearing a sort of crosshair symbol, a circle with a vertical and horizontal line through the center. He was carrying a gun in one hand, believed to be a .45 caliber pistol. The hooded man told the couple he needed money and a car to get to Mexico. He claimed to be an escaped convict from a jail in a city with a 2-word name, later discovered to be Deer Lodge, Montana, where he had supposedly killed a guard and stolen a car, eventually ditching it to find something less conspicuous. The man brought out several pre-cut lengths of plastic clothesline and told Shepard to tie up Hartnell before proceeding to tie her up as well. After checking Hartnell's bonds, he found that Shepard had tied them too loosely and retied the knots. He then drew a knife and stabbed them both repeatedly. Hartnell suffered 6 stab wounds and Shepard 10. The killer hiked approximately 460 meters up to Knoxville Road and, using a black felt-tip pen, drew on Hartnell's car door the crosshair symbol he wore in his chest, and underneath wrote details of the previous murders as well as the murders of Hartnell and Shepard. Directly under the crosshair symbol was the word Vallejo, followed by the dates of the previous murders, then the date and time of the most recent murder, followed by the words, by knife. A man and his son, fishing in a nearby cove, had heard the screams and went to seek help from park rangers in the area after discovering the couple. At 7:40 p.m., Officer Slate of the Napa County Sheriff's Office received a call from a payphone from a man claiming he had just committed a crime. He initially stated, "I want to report a murder. No, a double murder. They are 2 miles north of park headquarters. They were in a white Volkswagen Commandeer." After a brief pause, the dispatcher asked, "Where are you now?" And in a voice barely audible came the words, "I'm the one that did it." KVON reporter Pat Stanley found the payphone the call came from still off the hook. It was only a few blocks from the sheriff's office and approximately 43 kilometers from the crime scene. Detectives lifted a still wet palm print from the telephone, but were never able to match it to any suspect. Napa County Sheriff's deputies Dave Collins and Ray Land were the first law enforcement to arrive at the scene. Shepard was conscious when Collins arrived, providing him with a detailed description of the attacker. The couple were taken to Queen of the Valley Hospital in Napa by ambulance. Shepard lapsed into a coma during transport, never regaining consciousness, and eventually dying 2 days later in hospital. Hartnell survived to recount his tale to the press, and Napa County Detective Ken Narlow, who was assigned to the case from the outset, worked on solving the crime until his retirement in 1987. On October 11, 1969, a cab driver, Paul Stein, picked up a fare at the intersection of Mason and Geary Street, 1 block west from Union Square. The man requested to be driven to Washington Street and Maple Street in Presidio Heights. For whatever reason, Stein drove 1 block further past Maple to Cherry Street. His passenger then produced a 9mm handgun, shot Stein in the head, took his wallet and car keys, and tore off a section of his blood-stained shirt tail. 3 teenagers who happened to be across the street around 9:55 p.m. saw the incident and phoned the police while the crime was in progress. They observed a white male wiping the cab down before walking away toward the Presidio, 1 block to the north. 2 blocks from the crime scene, patrol officers Don Fuke and Eric Zelms were on their way to respond to the call when they saw a white male pedestrian, approximately 35 to 45 years old, and 5 foot 10 inches tall, with a crew cut similar to, but slightly older and taller than in the description provided by the witnesses. The police dispatcher had also put out an erroneous report that the suspect was a black male, causing the officers to drive past the man without stopping. The search continued, but no suspects were found. Initially, the Stein murder was believed to be a routine robbery that had escalated into violence. However, a few days after the murder, the San Francisco Chronicle received a new letter from Zodiac that claimed credit for the murder and contained part of the scrap of blood-stained shirt taken from the victim as proof. The witnesses worked with a police artist to prepare a composite sketch of Stein's killer, and then a second version of the sketch a few days later. Detectives Bill Armstrong and Dave Toschi were assigned to the case, and this would be the last murder officially confirmed as being attributed to the Zodiac killer. The letter sent to the Chronicle also contained disturbing statements about what Zodiac might do next. It read, "This is the Zodiac speaking. I am the murderer of the taxi driver over by Washington Street and Maple Street last night. To prove this, here is a bloody stained piece of his shirt. The SF police would have caught me last night if they had searched the park properly, instead of holding road races with their motorcycles, seeing who could make the most noise. The car drivers should have just parked their cars and sat there quietly waiting for me to come out of cover. School children make nice targets. I think I shall wipe out a school bus some morning. Just shoot out the front tire and then pick off the kiddies as they come bouncing out." The letter, as with the others, was signed only with the crosshair used as a marker in the previous attacks, what became known as the Zodiac symbol. On October 20 at 2 p.m, someone claiming to be the Zodiac called the Oakland Police Department, demanding that one of 2 prominent lawyers, either F. Lee Bailey or Melvin Belli, appear on AM San Francisco, a talk show on KGO-TV hosted by Jim Dunbar. Bailey was not available, but Belli did appear on the show. Dunbar appealed to viewers to keep the lines open. The man claiming to be Zodiac called in several times, and Belli asked the caller if he had a less ominous name. The caller picked Sam. He said he would not reveal his true name as he was afraid of being sent to the gas chamber, California's capital punishment method at the time. Belli arranged to meet the caller outside a shop on Mission Street in Daly City, but no one arrived. The call was later traced back to a patient in a mental care institution, and investigators concluded the man was not the Zodiac. On November 8, Zodiac mailed a card with another cryptogram consisting of 340 characters. This cipher, dubbed Z340, remained unsolved for over 51 years. On December 5, 2020, it was deciphered by an international team of private citizens, including American software engineer David Oranjak, Australian mathematician Sam Blake, and Belgian programmer Jarl van Eyck. The code read, "I hope you are having lots of fun in trying to catch me. That wasn't me on the TV show. Which brings up a point about me. I am not afraid of the gas chamber, because it will send me to paradise all the sooner. Because now I have enough slaves to work for me, where everyone else has nothing when they reach paradise, so they are afraid of death. I am not afraid, because I know that my new life will be an easy one in paradise. The following day, the Zodiac mailed a 7-page letter stating that 2 policemen stopped and actually spoke with him 3 minutes after he shot and killed Stein. Excerpts from the letter were published in the Chronicle on November 12, including the Zodiac's claim. That same day, Officer Don Fuke wrote a memo explaining what had happened on the night of Stein's murder. On December 20, exactly 1 year after the first 2 murders, the Zodiac mailed a letter to Belli that included another swatch of Stein's shirt and claimed to need help. There is no solid consensus on the actual number of victims the Zodiac killed, or even how long he was really operational for. In the 1986 non-fiction book Zodiac, author Robert Graysmith published a list attributing 49 victims to the Zodiac. This list included some crimes which have either been entirely solved or whose links to the Zodiac have been completely debunked by investigators. On April 8, 1962, a 29-year-old cab driver, Raymond Davis, was murdered in Oceanside, California. 1 day before the murder, an individual believed to be the culprit had phoned the Oceanside Police Department and told them, "I am going to pull something here in Oceanside, and you'll never be able to figure it out." A few days after the murder, police received another call from who was presumed to be the same individual, in which he told police details of the murder and said he would kill a bus driver next. On June 4, 1963, in northern Santa Barbara County, a young couple, 18-year-old Robert George Domingos and his fiancée, 17-year-old Linda Faye Edwards, were shot dead on a beach near Lompoc, having skipped school that day. Police believed the killer shot them repeatedly in the back and chest with a .22 caliber weapon. He then placed their bodies in a small shack and tried, unsuccessfully, to burn it to the ground. On February 5, 1964, 19-year-old newlyweds Johnny Ray Swindle and Joyce Ann Swindle were gunned down while walking along Ocean Beach in San Diego, California, while on their honeymoon. Johnny remained alive for hours, despite bullet wounds to his back, left thigh, left ear, and temple. Joyce died almost instantly after she was shot in the back, left arm, and head. The suspect then took Johnny's wallet and left the scene. On October 30, 1966, at Riverside City College, 18-year-old Sherry Jo Bates was stabbed to death and nearly decapitated. This case's connection to Zodiac was only revealed years later when San Francisco Chronicle reporter Paul Avery received a tip regarding similarities between the Zodiac killings and the circumstances surrounding Bates's death. On June 8, 1967, at around 10 p.m., 35-year-old Enidine Molina Martinez and 36-year-old Fermin Rodriguez were relaxing in their car on Vallecito Road in Alameda County, California, when a stranger approached them and told them to get out of the car. Fermin was shot as he exited the car, and the killer abducted Enidine, leaving Rodriguez dead beside the car. The killer then stopped by the entrance of Sunol Regional Wilderness Preserve, where Enidine attempted to escape. He shot her twice in the back, killing her instantly, before driving away. officers found Enadine's body at 11 p.m. and shortly after, Furman's body, along with their car. The weapon used here was also a .22 caliber. Rape and robbery were ruled out as motives, and the murders occurred close to where the Zodiac had mailed a letter to the LA Times newspaper in March of 1971. On February 21, 1970, 24-year-old decorated Vietnam veteran John Franklin Hood and his fiancée, 20-year-old DMV worker Sandra Garcia, were visiting East Beach in Santa Barbara. They were discovered the following day, lying face down on their picnic blanket. Hood suffered 11 knife wounds, the majority of which were inflicted to his face and back, with Garcia receiving the brunt of the vicious attack, leaving her almost unrecognizable. The bone-handled 4-inch fish knife used in their murder was retrieved from beneath the blanket, partially buried in the sand. Sexual motives and robbery were once again ruled out. The double murder bore many similarities to both the murder of Domingos and Edwards and the Lake Berryessa attack on Hartnell and Shepard. On March 22, 1980, on Highway 132, in an area west of Modesto, 22-year-old Kathleen Johns and her infant daughter were abducted by an unidentified man. 7 months pregnant, Johns had been driving late at night with her 10-month-old daughter when a car, maintaining a consistent speed behind her, began flashing its headlights and honking its horn, attempting to get Johns to pull over. She stopped on the side of the road, with the other car parking close behind. A man exited the vehicle, approached her car, and told her he noticed her right side rear wheel was wobbling, offering to fix it for her. After finishing his work, he drove away, but when Johns pulled back onto the highway, the wheel almost immediately shook free and came off the car, causing her to pull over once more. The man returned and pulled up beside her, offering to take her to the nearest service station. Reluctantly, she agreed, collected her possessions and her child, and climbed into his car. They passed several service stations during the drive, but the man did not stop. He drove in silence, back and forth around the back roads near Tracy in San Joaquin County for around 90 minutes, with Johns questioning why he hadn't yet stopped at any of the stations, and the man changing the subject each time. When he finally stopped at an intersection, Johns was able to jump out of the car with her daughter and hide in a field. The driver searched for her for some time with a flashlight, telling her that he would not hurt her before eventually giving up. Johns hitched a ride to the police station in Patterson to report the incident. When she gave her statement, she also noticed and stated that the composite sketch of Paul Stine's killer was the man she recognized as her abductor. Fearing that the man might return to kill them, the sergeant had Johns wait in the dark at a restaurant nearby. When her car was eventually found, it had been gutted and torched. Most accounts show that the man threatened to kill Johns and her daughter while driving them around, but at least one police report disputes this. Her account to Paul Avery indicated that her abductor left his car and searched for her in the dark with a flashlight. However, in one report she made to police, she stated that he did not leave the vehicle. On June 19, 1970, 25-year-old police sergeant Richard Philip Radatic was killed by 3 shots from a .38 caliber revolver at point-blank range through the driver's side window of his vehicle while in the process of serving a parking ticket in the Hague-Ashbury district in San Francisco. Police had investigated a possible lead to Zodiac who alluded to his responsibility for the crime in taunting notes mailed to authorities, though no direct evidence has ever been established to support his involvement. Finally, on September 6, 1970, 25-year-old Donna Ann Lass disappeared from State Line, Nevada. On March 22, 1971, a postcard bearing an advertisement on the back for Forest Pines condominiums near Incline Village at Lake Tahoe was received at the Chronicle. Again, no evidence was uncovered to connect Lass's disappearance with the Zodiac. Communications with authorities continued for the remainder of 1970 via letters and greeting cards to the press. In a letter postmarked April 20, 1970, the Zodiac wrote, "My name is," followed by a blank space and a 13-character cipher that has not been solved to this day. The Zodiac went on to state that he was not responsible for the recent bombing of a police station in San Francisco, referring to the death of Sergeant Brian McDonnell 2 days after the bombing at Park Station in Golden Gate Park. He added, "There is more glory to killing a cop than a civ, because a cop can shoot back." The letter also included a diagram of a bomb the Zodiac claimed that he would use to blow up a school bus. At the bottom of the letter, he had drawn the Zodiac symbol, followed by an equal sign, the number 10, the letters SFPD, another equal sign, and the number 0, taunting police with a supposed body count, like keeping score during a sports match. A greeting card, postmarked April 28, 1970, was sent to the Chronicle next. The card said, "I hope you enjoy yourselves when I have my blast," followed by the Zodiac symbol. On the back, the Zodiac had threatened to use the bus bomb soon, unless the newspaper published the full details he had written. He also stated he wanted to start seeing people wearing, quote, "some nice Zodiac buttons." Zodiac never did have his request fulfilled, though, later on, many members of the press who worked at the Chronicle during Zodiac's active years did wear buttons that read, "I am not Paul Avery," in case the killer decided to go after Avery and mistook one of them for his intended target. The next letter that came was postmarked June 26, 1970. The Zodiac stated that he was upset that he did not see people wearing Zodiac buttons. He wrote, "I shot a man sitting in a parked car with a .38, possibly referring to the murder of Sergeant Radatic 1 week earlier." Included with this letter was a Phillips 66 road map of the San Francisco Bay Area. On the image of Mount Diablo, the Zodiac had drawn his chosen symbol from previous letters and placed a 0, a 3, a 6, and a 9 at the top. The instructions in the letter stated that the 0 was, quote, "to be mag.n." The letter also contained a 32-letter cipher that the killer claimed would, in conjunction with the code, lead to the location of a bomb that he had buried and set to detonate in the fall. The cipher was never decoded, and the alleged bomb was never located. This note was signed with the scoring Zodiac 12, SFPD 0. In a new letter received at the Chronicle, postmarked July 24, 1970, the Zodiac took credit for the abduction of Kathleen Johns 4 months after the incident. In a letter marked 2 days later, he paraphrased a song from The Mikado, a 2-act comic opera set in Japan in the late 1800s, adding his own lyrics about making a, quote, "little list" of the ways in which he planned to torture his slaves in paradise. The letter was signed with a large, exaggerated version of the Zodiac symbol and a new scoring, which read Zodiac 13, SFPD 0. An extra note on the bottom of the letter stated, P.S. The Mount Diablo code concerns radians and hash inches along the radians, the hash symbol seemingly used to indicate a certain measurement. In 1981, a close examination of the radian hint by Zodiac researcher Gareth Penn led to the discovery that a radian angle, when placed over the map per Zodiac's instructions, pointed to the locations of two of the past attacks he claimed credit for. On October 7, 1970, the Chronicle received a 3x5-inch card signed by the Zodiac with the crosshair symbol and a small cross reportedly drawn in blood. The card's message was formed by pasting words and letters cut from an edition of the Chronicle, and 13 holes were punched across the card. On October 27, Chronicle reporter Paul Avery received a Halloween card signed with the letter Z and the Zodiac symbol. Handwritten inside the card was the note, Peekaboo, you are doomed. The threat was taken seriously and was the subject of a front-page story in the Chronicle. Soon after receiving the letter, Avery received another, this time from an anonymous sender alerting him to the similarities between Zodiac's activities and the unsolved murder of Sherry Jo Bates. The final letter sent, confirmed to be written by the Zodiac, was postmarked January 29, 1974. It praised the movie The Exorcist as, quote, the best satirical comedy that I have ever seen. The letter also included another snippet of a verse from the Mikado, and an unusual symbol at the bottom that has remained unexplained by researchers. Also at the bottom, another scoring read, Me 37, SFPD 0. Several further letters were received by the media over the years, though all were either found unusable due to the mismatch in handwriting samples or found to be hoaxes. In the book titled Zodiac by Robert Graysmith, he focused heavily on one Arthur Lee Allen as a potential suspect based on circumstantial evidence. Allen had been interviewed by police from the early days of their investigations into these murders and was the subject of several search warrants over a 20-year period. Jack Mullinax of the Vallejo PD subsequently wrote that Allen had left the US Navy in 1958 by way of dishonorable discharge and was fired in March 1968 from his job as an elementary school teacher after allegations of sexual misconduct with students. He was generally well regarded by those who knew him, but was also described as, quote, fixated on young children and angry at women. On October 6, 1969, Allen was interviewed by Detective John Lynch of the Vallejo PD. Allen had been reported in the vicinity of the Lake Berryessa attack, but claimed to be scuba diving at Salt Point. He was brought to police attention once more in 1971, when his friend Donald Cheney reported to police in Manhattan Beach that Allen had spoken of his desire to kill people, used the name Zodiac, and was known to secure a flashlight to a firearm for visibility at night. According to Cheney, his conversations with Allen took place no later than January 1, 1969. In September 1972, San Francisco police obtained a search warrant for Allen's residence, and in 1974, he was arrested for sexually assaulting a 12-year-old boy, pleading guilty and serving 2 years in prison. In February 1991, Vallejo police served another search warrant for Allen's residence, and 2 days after his death in 1992, they issued a search and seizure on his remaining property. In July 1992, Michael Mageau identified Allen from a photo lineup as the man who shot him in 1969, pointing directly at the photo with little hesitance and saying, "That's him. It's the man who shot me." Despite this, police officer Donald Fuke, who is speculated to have seen the Zodiac fleeing from the Stein killing, stated that Allen weighed about 100 pounds more than the man he saw, adding that his face was too round. Nancy Slover, who received the call from the Zodiac in the aftermath of the Mageau-Ferrin shooting, said that the man on the phone sounded nothing like Allen. A letter sent to Riverside PD from Bates's killer was typed with a Royal typewriter with an Elite type, the same brand found during the 1991 search of Allen's residence. He owned and wore a Zodiac brand wristwatch, lived in Vallejo, and worked only minutes away from where Darlene Ferrin lived, as well as the site of one of the killings. In 2002, the SFPD developed a partial DNA profile from the saliva found on the stamps and envelopes from the Zodiac letters. When compared to Allen's DNA, this test did not indicate any match. Retired police handwriting expert Lloyd Cunningham, who worked on the Zodiac case for decades, stated, "They gave me banana boxes full of Allen's handwriting, and none of it even came close to the Zodiac." Actor Mark Ruffalo, who portrayed Detective Toschi in the 2007 film Zodiac, commented, "If you get into who those cops were, you realize how they have to take their hunches, their personal beliefs, out of it. Dave Toschi said to me, as soon as that guy walked in the door, I knew it was him. He was sure he had him, but he never had a solid piece of evidence. So he had to keep investigating every other lead." In 2010, Dave Toschi stated that all the evidence against Allen ultimately turned out to be negative. Another of the more infamous and major suspects investigated was one Rick Marshall, on claims that he privately hinted at being a murderer, and because Marshall lived in Riverside in 1966 and San Francisco in 1969, close to the scenes of the Bates, Stein, and Radatic murders. He was a silent film enthusiast and projectionist, screening, among other films, Segundo di Chomon's The Red Phantom from 1907, a name used by the author of a possible 1974 Zodiac letter. His occupation was also used as an explanation for Zodiac's connection and references to The Most Dangerous Game. In October 2021, what was claimed to be a team of over 40 cold case investigators composed of former law enforcement, intelligence officers, and journalists stated they had identified the Zodiac killer as one Gary Francis Post, who died in 2018 at the age of 80. The team claimed to have uncovered forensic evidence and photos from Post's own personal darkroom, and noted that scars on his forehead matched those they said were described on the killer. They also claimed that removing the letters of his name from one of Zodiac's cryptograms revealed an alternate message. The FBI subsequently stated that the case remained open, and that there was no new information to report, while local law enforcement expressed skepticism to the Chronicle regarding the team's findings. Riverside police officer Ryan Railsback said these claims largely relied on circumstantial evidence. It was also found that no legitimate reports stated any kind of scar being noted on Zodiac's forehead. There were plenty of other suspects investigated over the years, but most were either cleared or completely unnamed. In April 2004, the SFPD marked the Zodiac case as inactive, citing caseload pressure and resource demands effectively closing the case. However, they reopened their case just prior to March 2007. The case is currently still listed as open in Napa County and the city of Riverside. And that is the violent and chaotic story of the Zodiac, a still unidentified figure who strung authorities and media along with a series of misleading letters, ciphers, and false threats for over 60 years. Don't forget, I stream 4 days a week over at twitch.tv/Jayborwocky, that's JAYBBERWOCKY. You can also show your support and help out the podcast by heading to patreon.com/Jayborwocky and signing up for one of the member tiers listed. Make sure to keep a weather eye out for announcements regarding future episodes. @HangnailPod is the official Twitter for the podcast, and all announcements will appear there. Thank you all for joining me. I hope you enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you next time.